All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here this morning, delirious as always. We are going to get into the rabbit hole a little bit. Um, it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be fun. Hopefully, it'll be educational. Um, but I'm going to use my chalkboard because it's a lot easier for me to write on the chalkboard. And so, for those of you that are going to be watching from home, at work, the penitentiary. I don't judge wherever you're watching this video from. I have former students that have been watching the videos and sending me feedback, which is really cool too. Some of the former students, and by former students watching my videos, I mean my mom. So just to give you guys a reference before I go to the chalkboard, this is traditionally called the leg extension machine. I don't like that word. Um, what do you have against machines? No, I don't like putting one motion to an exercise because as we know, we're going to have flexion and extension. So when you just say one of the motions and you know it works a specific muscle group, it imprints in our head Pavlovian pattern recognizing that, oh, extension must be quads. Extension must be quad. Leg extension machine works quads, extension must be quads. And we don't assess specific muscles with specific motions without the context of contraction. Um, so we'll get into more of that in 450. But I wanted to put up in a reference. So if you go to Google and you type in the word, I feel like it's like Voldemort, like the term that shall not be said, that shall not be named. You'll see this exercise. And I specifically want to make sure we start this conversation in kind of that mid-range of motion where there's tension, right? In other words, if he relaxes all of his muscles, flexion is going to happen. So it's not at the beginning, it's not at the end, it's somewhere in the middle. That's where I want to start our conversation today, okay? So we are going to go into the rabbit hole a little bit further in regard to what do we know so far. We know that muscles influence motion and contraction. In this exercise, we're going to have the knee extensors doing a job, and the knee extensors are going to influence extension through concentrics and flexion through eccentrics. And if you choose, the knee extensors can prevent flexion through isometrics if you choose to hold that position over a period of time. Right? We're going to work in a little common sense physics. I know I said the P word. It's not that bad because our brains and our bodies have so much knowledge of physics that we don't give ourselves credit for. Just like they do. Okay? So within the knee extension component of this exercise, literally the extension, if the person starts, they step into the machine, they put the rack where they want, the plates where they want, and the first movement will be knee extension. Within that one motion, extension is extension, further away from fetal, flexion is flexion, closer to fetal. There's three phases. First thing you have to do is speed up the extension. So imagine being at a stop sign or a red light and you're stopped, right? You're not moving. You have a constant zero velocity. Zero is a number. And the light goes green. You have to speed up your motion. Every time to speed up. Nothing slows down or speeds up instantaneously. The terms that I'm using, speed up, slow down, that's a layman's terms for accelerations. But we're just gonna say speed up and slow down. So I have to speed up the, unless I am, what's the politically correct way of saying this? Unless I am psychotic, I probably don't want to keep speeding up the extension the whole like it's almost like if you get to the red light and it turns green, you're not going to slam on the gas and just keep speeding up. You're going to speed up until you reach a desirable speed, and then you're going to cruise control or stay at that speed until the next orange stoplight stops you. But the point is you're not going to keep speeding up the extension. You literally like throw the batting off your shin. So you're going to speed up the extension, and then you're going to maintain a constant speed of extension. Slow and control, as they say. Now, I'm not telling you how to exercise. It's not what this class is about. I'm not telling you what you should and shouldn't do. But it kind of makes sense that if we're doing the extension machine, I don't want to go all out and sling the padding off, right? So you're going to have extension, you're going to speed up the extension, then you're going to try to maintain a constant speed of extension. And then at the end, you're coming up to another red light, end of your range of motion. What speeds up must slow down. Our joints are not made like merry-go-rounds that can infinitely spin over and over and over again. We have to rotate, then reset in order for us to rotate again. So if we speed up the extension, have a constant extension, well, we got to slow down the extension. What speeds up must slow down. Speeding up the extension in this exercise is probably going to happen, it will happen when you first start, right? Because you're flexed, you're going to speed up the extension, constant extension, then you have to slow down the extension. What's going to happen after you put on the brakes of extension? We're going to speed up the flexion. You're going to have a constant speed of flexion. And we got to slow down the flexion. And we're going to do it all over again. If you're doing 10 repetitions, it's 10 repetitions of speed up, constant, slow down, speed up, constant, slow down. Make sense? No different than an elevator. No different. The elevator, you get in the elevator, it's going to speed you up. You're going to go to constant, and then you're going to slow down. Then you're going to speed up, constant, slow down, and you feel those little differences. You feel when the elevator pushes on you a little more to speed you up, and you also feel when the elevator pushes on you a little more to slow you down. But you also feel like a little weightlessness at some phases too. Like when you're going down and the elevator goes down, it speeds you up going down, you kind of feel like it gets pulled away from you a little bit, right? Also, when you're slowing down going up, it feels like it pulls away from you a little bit. So this is what the lesson is about today. This speeding up is what we call an acceleration. And accelerations from high school physics have to be because of some force that's greater than some other force. Something has to be greater. Constant speeds are only maintained when there is no one force greater than the other force. There's a tie. It's got to be a tie. When you hit your cruise control, you're no longer pressing on the gas pedal. And so your effort in your car, it just has to match the friction and the wind pushing up against it. Tie. Constant velocity is with ties. Nothing is greater than the other. And then acceleration. So something has to be greater than something else anytime we speed up or we slow down. And anytime there is a tie, we can look at a constant speed or constant velocity. Let's go back to our example. Who is playing tug of war in this exercise? On one side, we have the weight stack itself. The padding is just a vessel. The padding is a representative of the weight stack, just like our shin bones are representatives of our muscles. That makes sense? The shin is pushing on the pad, but that's not what's creating these things, right? The shin is just the representative. When my brother smashed me upside the head when I was 8 with a baseball bat, it happened. It was fast. I mean, you run and start along. The bat was just a representative of his muscle, right? Look, I turned out fine. So here we have a tug of war of muscle force being represented by the shins. And we have the weight stack being represented by the padding. Does everybody understand? So the shins don't have to be greater, less, or equal than the padding, because those two things are in direct contact. You started off says those things have to feed each other. What this is really about is my muscles versus the weight stack. And the shin and the padding are the representatives of those two forces. Okay? In this first scenario, if he has 40 pounds, again, we're not trying to solve physics problem. We're just trying to take what life has given us as obvious and true and apply these concepts. If he's holding that position, there's 40 pounds on the weight stack, and he's holding that position, doesn't it make sense that those two things, the external force and the internal forces, have to have a tie? Because if the weight was stronger, something would happen, and if his muscles were stronger, something would happen, In fact, if his muscles decided to be greater than the weight, he would start to speed up the extensions. We know that, right? So the only way to maintain that constant speed of zero speed, the number is the top. Now his muscles are choosing to top. It's like in a tug of war, I can choose to let my hips top. But there must be a top. If his muscles decided to work more or recruit more than the weight from that position, he would have to start speeding up extension. True? All right. Take a sip from your shot drink. This is where it gets fun. I want to try one of those, but now I'm curious. If his knee extensors decide to be greater than the weight, extension is going to happen. And if his extensors kept being greater than the weight, it would keep speeding up. Think about that for a second. When you're in the elevator and the elevator starts to speed you up, it only speeds you up for a small amount of time. If the elevator kept speeding you up, you would be in a catapult. See what I'm saying? So once the knee extensors speed up that extension, it's not for a long time. Keeping it going doesn't require as much force as getting it going. You ever move furniture? What's the hardest thing about it? Getting it going, right? Keeping it going is not as tough. Getting it going is the tough part. But once you have it going, it's not as tough to keep it going. So speeding up the extension is going to take the muscle working more than the weight. But keeping it going doesn't take as much. Does that make some common sense? Now, what speeds up must slow down, and we are a class of no clang. What I mean by that is once you get to the end of your range of motion of that extension, you are going to let off. Your muscles are going to choose to let off of their pull and let gravity slow down your extension. I didn't say the muscles turned off. But there's no need to keep working more than the weight if you're getting to the end of your road. Does that make any sense? Think of it like this. If you had extension in this exercise and you got to the end and you said, well, I'm Ted Do, I'm hard-headed, I'm stubborn. I'm not going to let, I like to win at everything. I'm not going to let the weight win. You're just going to hold it there forever. Like, it's just, you're just going to be in an extended position. you have to let off. When you let off a little bit, now the weight can be greater than your muscle work. And that's what's actually going to slow down the extension. You're letting the weight be greater for that acceleration, for that change, slowing down the extension. You let off. Let's go the other way. Starting from this position, option number 1, tie. No motion's going to happen. Option number 2, muscles be greater. You're going to speed up the extension. We just did that one, right? So what's the other option? Well, if you start there, how can I speed up the flexion? Well, one way I could speed up the flexion is to yank on my hamstrings, right? Pull on my knee flexors. That doesn't sound logical to this exercise, right? So I'm going to use my knee extensors, and instead of tying or being greater, I'm going to let off. I'm going to let off the pull a little bit. I'm going to lessen the innervation. I'm going to choose to let the weight speed up the flexion. So in summary, for these exercises that we're going to do for the next couple of days, what do we know? There's going to be a sequence of motions. Flexion, extension, extension, flexion, however you start, however you finish. Within those movements, there's phases. You have a speed up phase. You're going to have a constant phase, and we're going to get into exercises or movements where there is no constant. Like I don't want a constant speed if I'm trying to slap a mosquito, right? There's going to be exceptions to the rule where you just want to put on the gas. You want to be Talladega Nights, just want to go fast. But for most human movements, slow and controlled, it's like elevators. And there's going to be speed ups, constants, and slowdowns. It's important for us to see and understand that any time we're changing the speed of something, speeding up or slowing it down, some force has to be greater than another force. And anytime we have a constant speed, that includes cruise control or 0, there's going to be a tie. So what I'm getting at is when you're doing, let's say you're doing a chest press or a bench press, and you're doing 200 pounds. You're not doing 200 pounds throughout the entire bench press. There's going to be phases where you're doing less. There's going to be phases where you're doing more. And there's going to be phases where you're actually doing 200. When you're doing this leg extension machine at 40-pound plates, all I'm trying to tell you is that that whole exercise, you're not doing 40 pounds. There's going to be periods where you're doing more. There's going to be periods where you're doing less. And there's going to be periods where you're doing 40. The easiest one is to say, well, anytime I have a constant speed, whether that's 0 or slow and controlled, I'm actually doing the weight I think I'm doing. That's important for rehab, therapy, knowing when in these phases you're doing more, less, or the same. And then there's going to be periods in the exercise where you're doing more and less. And my job is to teach you how to see those phases and also learn computer. Oh, that's not good. Oh, that's sorry. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to give you a cheat sheet. All right, for the cheat sheet. For concentric, where's our concentric phase? Our concentric in this exercise would be the extension, right? right? Speeding up the extension in this exercise, speeding up with concentric contraction, your muscles have to be great. You got to do more than the weight to make it speed up. In the concentric phase, if you have a constant speed, like your elevator, you're like, okay, I sped it up, I want to keep it going at the same speed, you no longer have to work more. If you kept working more than the weight, you would keep speeding up. Does that make sense? You're going to speed it up a little bit, then you're going to take your foot off the gas and take cruise control. It doesn't take as much force to keep something going. It takes more force to get it going. So that's what I'm trying to explain today. So constant speed of concentrics, there's going to be a tie. You're actually equal to oil. This is important to me because in undergraduate, I was taught concentrics is always greater than weight. Concentrics is always less than weight. I got my PhD, I learned that's not all the time true. It depends on the phase. It's more detailed. So with the concentric phase, speeding up has to be greater. That's the only way we're going to move the furniture. Be greater than friction. Keeping it going doesn't take as much force. All I got to do is tie. And so think about it. If speeding up concentric was more, keeping it going was a tie, what do you think slowing down the concentric would be? Less. You know, let off. Think about that. After you write that, check out my silly faces. When you're doing, let's say for instance, I'm going to do a couple examples where your bodies know this. Guys, your bodies know this. Think about somebody doing a curl and their facial expression. Right? They're like, you get to the top, you got to let off. Because gravity can slow down the flexion. I didn't need my muscles to do it. Or think about like somebody going for a squat and they're like, okay, I got this. They go down and they're like, and then at the top they can kind of let off. Like it's easier at the top because gravity can slow you down. Down there, my muscles have to slow me down. All right, and getting back up. Okay, just layman's way to look at it. So within the concentrics, speeding up the concentrics, got to work more. Constant speed in the concentrics, you're going to have to tie. Because again, anything greater is going to speed up more and anything less is going to start to slow down. The only way to keep it going the same speed is to choose to tie, which is great because you're actually doing the weight. Like, think of it like this. If you are on a scale and you're on an elevator and you look at the scale and the scale tells me 200 pounds. All right, 210. When the elevator in the concentric example starts to speed me up going up, I look at the scale, it's going to read more than 210 because the elevator has to be greater than my weight to speed me up. But once I hit a cruise control, once I'm going up to the 20th floor, you ever notice in an elevator, you don't even feel like you're moving. Doesn't it feel like, I don't even feel like I'm moving as I keep going up. I look down at the scale again and it's my weight. It's 210. It's actually doing my weight as we go at a constant velocity because both of us are moving at the same speed. And I know it has to be the same because if it started pushing more, I'd start speeding up again. And if it started pushing less, I'd start to slow down. The only way to keep it going the same speed is to tie. So in concentrics, concentric phase, speeding up, it's going to be greater. Your muscle has to be greater than the weight. Constant speed, tie. Anytime you hear constant, tie. And then slowing down in the concentrics, your muscle agonist will choose to be less. In other words, you're letting the weight slow down the end of the range of motion. It's still concentrics, because it's still recruiting, it's still working more than rest. It's just you're letting off. You're letting off a little bit. Does that make any kind of sense? Awesome. Let's go to the eccentric phase. It's a little bit different. For the eccentric phase, in this example, it would be the flexion, right? The flexion would be the eccentrics. In this one, do you think, just use comment, let's just use our live data. Let's imagine that his legs were fully extended, straight legged, okay? Straight legged in that picture. And he's holding that position for the camera. If he's holding that position, that's a constant velocity, it's a constant speed of zero. And to maintain that, he has to match the weight, he has to tie the weight, right? So the only way to speed up the flexion is to let off. You can't choose to keep it the same, and you can't be greater because the machine won't let you go any further, or you don't want to hyperextend your knees. So you have to let off. You are going to choose to let the weight be greater than you. Just like sometimes when I'm playing tug of war with my kids, I may choose to let them win. I don't have to, but I choose to. Does that make sense? So in eccentrics, speeding up the motion, your muscles are going to choose to be less than the weight. The weight is greater than your muscles, but it's because you let it. Unless you just went to the T, you had no choice. Constant flexion in the eccentrics. It's got to be a tie. Because if your muscles started working more, it slow down. And if your muscles kept working less, it would keep speeding up. And we're saving the best for last. Slowing down the flexion. Not clanging, right? So if you don't want those plates to bang, and you need to slow down the flexion, the weight can't do that. The machine can't slow down the flexion without clang. So what do you think your muscles are going to do? Work greater than, less than, or equal to the weight? It has to be greater than. It has to be. And you know this, in the end, I can imagine like you're doing these reps and getting tired, and you're like, this is the hardest part, changing the direction here, because your muscles in these exercises have to be greater in two different reasons. Your muscles. That was literally my joints making noise, not my, like, you know what I mean. Delirium. Y'all, this is awesome. Your muscles have to be working more than the weight to slow down your flexion. Keep working more than your weight to change your direction to speed up your extension. There's a reason I'm emphasizing those two things. What? Just act normal, dude. It's so hard to act normal when you beat. Okay, act normal. Yoink. All right. So within that exercise, see if I could find one where they transition from flexion to extension a little bit better.
All right, guys, so late.
Man, good Lord. Okay. Up until today, we just looked at flexion and extension, extensors, concentric, eccentric. Exercises working my knee extensors. During the extension phase, concentric, flexion phase, eccentric. Today, what we're emphasizing is, hey, within those different motions, through those different contractions, there's phases. There's a speed up phase, there's a constant speed phase usually, and there's a slowdown phase. What speeds up must slow down. Everything takes time to slow down. Our eyes may not be able to process it. Our eyes actually only process like so many frames per second. Everything takes time to speed up and slow down. This person gets into this machine, puts on an amount of weight. For this example, we're saying 40 pounds. To speed up the extension, he has to push that pad more than the weight stack is 40 pounds, right? I mean, if all he did was push with 40 pounds, it wouldn't move, it would tie. He has to give more effort than the weight to speed up the extension. But it doesn't take as much force to keep it going once you got it going. Okay? So just for the conversation, I'm not saying I did this, but it follows the pattern of the physics, not necessarily the exact numbers. To speed up the extension, let's say he's pushing with 50 pounds of force. It's got to be more than the weight. But to keep it going at the same speed, it's 40 pounds again. Because if it would be less than 40, it would start to slow down. And if it was more than 40, he would keep speeding it up. The only way to keep it going at the same speed is to actually match it. At the end of the range of motion, though, he doesn't need to keep pushing with more than the weight. Because if he kept pushing with or more than the weight, he would never come down, is what I'm trying to tell you. Does that make sense? He would just stay up there. All right, my muscles are stubborn. I didn't train no losers. You're going to win. And it's like, okay, well, how do I come back down? At the end of the extension, he's going to let off and let gravity slow down the end of the extension and also let gravity speed up the flexion coming down. I didn't say he turned the muscles off. I'm not saying that at all. But this top part of the exercise, the weight is actually doing more than the muscles because the muscles are choosing to do so. And at the bottom part of this exercise, your muscles are going to be working more than the weight because they choose to and because they have to. Your muscles have to slow down the flexion eccentrically, change the direction, and speed up the extension concentrically. And what did we say about slowing down the flexion and then speeding up the extension? The muscles have to be greater to do that. And that is what plyometrics is. Plyometrics. I'm not talking about plyometric exercise. I'm saying the definition of plyometrics is a sequence of specific phases of contractions where your muscles have to be the reason you slow down motion one way, in this case, slowing down the flexion. Your muscles have to do that. and then immediately continue to work greater to speed up the extension. The plyometric sequence of an agonistic group is to slow down motion with eccentrics, change your direction, and then speed up motion with concentric. That specific phase. Why or is that specific point so important? That's where the most muscle damage happens. That's when ropes are going to fray. That's when ropes are going to bust. I'm not saying it's bad, it's good. But plyometrics is literally when the muscle is being lengthened to put on the brakes to slow it down and then change your direction to speed it up. That's when your muscle's sweating. That's when you're doing the most amount of work physiologically. It's not through the whole range of motion. It's in a very specific change in direction where your muscles have to change that direction. Sometimes I think although I know why I say it, it may not be the perfect, a good analogy for the gas and the brake, because those are two different pedals. Remember, we're talking about the same muscle. So think of it like this. I do not recommend you doing this to your vehicle, but imagine you were coasting in your vehicle. So you're moving in your car or truck or whatever you're riding. And you can do this on your bicycle too, but you put it in neutral. So you're moving and it's in neutral. And then all of a sudden, while you're moving, you put it in reverse and you slam on the gas. I told you, don't do this at home. It's the concept. Well, if you're moving and all of a sudden you go in reverse, that reverse is going to do two things. It's going to slow down your motion one way, change your direction, and speed up the motion the other way. That's how this is kind of working. Where your extensors in this exercise are going to slow down the flexion and then continue to be greater to speed up the extension. It's important for senior level, upper level kinesiology students to see where these things are happening, because that's when your muscles are under the most amount of tension. They're not being stressed the exact same all throughout the ranges of motion. There's going to be periods where the muscles are working greater, and there's going to be periods where the muscles are working less. I need to teach you guys how to see when they're working greater, especially because, again, that's where the damage, most of our delayed onset muscle soreness, the damage, the micro tears, is during those plyometrics. So what is plyometrics not? Plyometrics isn't the entire eccentric phase followed by the entire concentric phase. That's just a repetition. Makes no sense. Plyometrics is specifically slowing down motion through eccentrics and then changing your direction to speed up the motion with concentrics, where the muscles have to be great. Your muscles have to do it. So let's do another example. We're going to do heavy squats because that's how I will. Heavy squats. Y'all believe it? Good. Don't believe it. I struggle with just squats. What if I asked this question in an easier way? So for this exercise, we're not starting with concentric, right? You know, you get off, take the bar off of the rack. Keep, what is that? True. So I told you that last class. You can't just assume the first movement is concentric. Did you guys know that I would do half of a squat with 2,000 pounds of weight? I can't. I'm going down. I'm coming back up. The trick isn't to go down. Can you slow it down Does that make sense? So imagine, I mean, this guy's in incredible shape. Obviously, he's not stressing, but imagine if this was very heavy. Where would this exercise be harder? At the bottom or at the top? The bottom. That makes sense? Because at the bottom, you have to slow down your motion and you have to speed up your motion. At the top, you kind of relax at the top. That's all I'm trying to explain today, that there's going to be periods within rehab, exercises, strength and conditioning, where your muscles, and at the end of the day, your muscles, it's really cool. The weight is going to stay the same. I mean, there's some machines that are nice and they're expensive, but the weight's going to stay the same. So for these motions to happen, your muscles have to fluctuate between working greater, less, or the same. Your muscles are going to be the ones that are choosing. And we have to identify where the muscles work greater. That's where injury is most likely. That's where damage is most likely. That's where soreness is most likely. So that's why like plyometrics are associated with soreness. Because when you put on the brake and change direction, those fibers, those strings get frayed. You've never seen a rope pop while it's short. A rope is only going to pop when it's being pulled apart. Okay? So what we're going to develop the next day or two is how do we find, where do we look for the plyometric phases during exercises? And I gave you a little cheat sheet. Plyometrics is going to be slowing down the eccentric. So slowing down motion, putting on the brake with the eccentric, changing your direction, and speeding up motion with the concentric. And it has to be that sequence, guys. It has to be, because think of it like this. I'm going to let you finish right. Muscles can only, what do I teach you? Pull. If you pulled on a rope, let's say we had a jump rope, and somebody in front of class was on roller skates, and I pulled on that rope and they started rolling to me, I sped them up coming into my direction of pull. That'd be like a concentric analogy. Guys, once they start rolling to me, I can't push them to a stop. Once the concentric happens, I can't push them to a stop. But you know what I can do? Two things back to back. If they're rolling away from me, I can pull and slow down their motion away, change their direction, and speed up their motion too. That I can do back to back. Does that make sense? So that's why with anything that pulls, being lengthened followed by shortening is the only two things those muscles can do back to back when they are doing that job. Once a muscle is shortened, something else has to slow it down or lengthen it. And that's why your muscle lets off and lets gravity slow it down. And lets gravity be lengthened. Lets gravity lengthen it. Then, when the roller skater's pulling away from you, then you can yank to slow it down and then speed it up. Here's a better analogy. And I swear to goodness, this will be the end of it. What if the roller skater was on a hill? I think this will be a much better analogy. Roller skater is on a hill and I'm pulling on them, right? So I can shorten and make them come to me, and then I can let off and let gravity slow them down, let gravity speed them up down the hill. And then I could start pulling more again to slow them down and to speed them up. And then gravity is going to slow them down and speed them up. And that's what's happening. Your muscles are going to slow down the extension, speed up the flexion, then gravity is going to slow down the flexion, speed up the extension. Muscles are going to slow down the extension, speed up the flexion. Make sense? Speed up, slow down, stay the same. On the test, every time I say exercise, and I'm only going to use basic exercise. I'm not going to make you do transverse pelvic, not for this stuff. Basic common exercises. And there's always going to be inference. We don't assume, but if I tell you, it's different. We're going to do all these exercises slow and controlled, just like an elevator would bring you up and down slow and controlled. So that way we know there has to be speed ups, constants, slow downs. Speed ups, constants, slow downs. And if there's a speed up, something's got to be greater than something else. And if there's a slowdown, something's got to be greater than something else. So I'm just asking you guys to identify where in the ranges of motion for these exercises are your muscles greater, less, or equal to the weight. Cool. All right, guys, you have a good one.